Unit 5, Targets for Preventive Medicine by Eric, Unit 4. Language Strategies for Awkward Situations by Hugh Traps Lomax.
Some time ago I was in a bicycle shop looking for a new lock for my bicycle. The shopkeeper showed me several, patiently explaining their advantages and disadvantages. None of them was quite what I wanted, and eventually I said to the shopkeeper, "I'll think about it, thanks very much," and left the shop. Why did I say I'll think about it and not something more straightforward, like none of these is right, they're too big, they're too small, they're too expensive, I'll go elsewhere? I think there are two reasons why I chose to say I'll think about it. The first is I didn't want the shopkeeper to feel that his products were not valued or that his time had been wasted. Second is that I didn't want to be the object of his possible annoyance or irritation. In other words, I didn't want him to feel bad, and I didn't want me to feel bad. We have words for this general behaviour pattern of not wanting ourselves or other people to feel bad as a result of the interactions that we have with other people. We talk about tact, which is defined in the Collins Concise Dictionary as the sense of what is fitting and considerate in dealing with others so as to avoid giving offence. Or we might equally call this, as many people do, politeness behaviour. Now notice that the definition of tact talks about avoiding giving offence. It's not talking about something positive that we do in order to make people feel better than they otherwise would. So here we're not talking about the kind of behaviour we get into when, for example, we console a friend whose cat has just been run over, or compliment our partner on a very well-cooked meal. We're not trying here to positively make people feel better, we're trying to avoid them feeling bad. So this is a negative kind of behaviour that I'm talking about, but the fact that it's negative doesn't mean that it's not terribly important. It is extremely important. It is essential to our self-preservation and to social cohesion. And for this reason, avoidance behaviour is of great interest to many different kinds of scholars. For example, it's an interest to biologists who study avoidance behaviour as part of an animal's behaviour patterns of aggression and defence. For example, patterns of fleeing or freezing or producing various protective responses. We all know that when we walk through Trafalgar Square, the pigeons automatically fly away as our feet approach them. We've all seen puppies who roll over on their backs and wave their tails between their legs when a larger dog comes along and takes an interest in them. Some of us may have seen what a centipede does when you touch it. It rolls up in a tight coil, thereby protecting itself from possible harm. Now, human beings do the same kind of thing, but they do it in a more sophisticated way, probably. And for this reason, sociologists, psychologists, and social psychologists take a great interest in avoidance behaviour. They see it as part of the means that we use for maintaining good social relationships and our own and others' face. Face has been defined as a person's sense of self, of public self-image. Linguists too take an interest in this kind of behaviour because they're interested in the communication tactics and the language forms employed to avoid conflict and maintain face. It has been said by the linguist Jenny Thomas that simply by speaking we trespass on another's space. So linguists are interested in what language means we use to mitigate the effects of this trespassing. The essence of linguistic tact is the choice of ways of speaking which minimise unpleasantness, embarrassment or conflict. The range of avoidance strategies can be summed up in three military metaphors. First metaphor is retreat. Under this strategy, we avoid meeting the person, we keep away, or we remain silent, or we avoid the subject or change the subject, we talk about something else. Second metaphor is the smokescreen metaphor. Now under this strategy, what we do is use, for example, conventional politeness formulae such as "excuse me," "would you mind," "sorry to bother you," or we go in for a lot of vagueness and ambiguity. We try to be imprecise. Teenagers are very good at this when parents ask them questions. "Who was that on the phone?" I ask, and my teenage son replies, "A friend." "Where are you going?" I ask, and he replies, "Out." Of course, he could say a lot more, but he chooses not to. He's avoiding saying things which he thinks might cause trouble. And of course, we all make use of a variety of vague expressions which come readily to hand as we speak. Sort of, like, lots of, kind of, and stuff. Words of that sort. I just used one. And of course, one of the things we do try to avoid when we're speaking to people is saying no. No is what sociologists call a dispreferred response in most contexts, and so we try to avoid it. Instead of saying no, we say yes and no, or that depends, or I suppose so, or up to a point. Third and last strategy is the camouflage strategy. In this strategy, we choose nice words rather than nasty ones, kind words rather than brutally honest ones. This is what we call euphemism, defined in the Shorter Oxford English Dictionary as a figure by which a less distasteful word or expression is substituted for one more exactly descriptive of what is intended. The linguist Deborah Cameron has a shorter and more striking description of euphemism. She simply calls it verbal hygiene. It's a way of keeping ourselves linguistically clean. There are various kinds of euphemism. The example we started with is a euphemism. "I'll think about it," but it's a euphemistic utterance rather than a euphemistic word or phrase. We all have a repertoire of such utterances to summon into use when circumstances demand. "You must come round one of these days," we say, or we hear, and this of course is not to be mistaken for a serious invitation. "That'd be really nice," we reply, or they reply, and this of course is not to be mistaken for an enthusiastic acceptance. But most euphemisms are single words or short phrases which describe people or things in a way which disguises or camouflages things about them which make us feel uncomfortable or uneasy. Here are a few quick examples from a number of different domains. One familiar category is expressions which make commercial products or public services less bad than they really seem less bad than they really are. For example, second class on British trains is called standard class. Sounds much better, doesn't it? Economy class on planes is called tourist class. Second-hand cars have been described as pre-enjoyed. An old house in an advertisement may be called a period house. A very small one may be called cosy. A price increase is called a price adjustment. All of these are clear examples of euphemistic language. Another area is the work area, in which the boss may be called the team leader, or employees may be called human resources, or to sack somebody is described as letting them go. A third and very large category is to do with the body and its functions, the physical part of human nature. So the toilet, for example, is referred to as the bathroom or the powder room. Having sex is referred to as sleeping with somebody or going to bed with them. Being old is described as getting on a bit or being a senior citizen. Dying is called passing away or humorously pushing up the daisies. All of these examples may seem amusing or even interesting. Interesting is itself a euphemism in some contexts, by the way, but hardly perhaps of great social significance. Recently, however, euphemism has come out of the private domain of interpersonal communication and moved into the public domain. It has become political. So the last category that I want to mention, I think, is a very important category. It's one which is much discussed in the media, and it's what is sometimes called politically correct language. The term political correctness is almost the opposite of a euphemism because it has become associated with absurdity and excess. So, for example, we have joke, politically correct expressions such as chronologically challenged, which is supposed to mean old, or follically different, which is supposed to mean bald. These are absurd, but the main idea behind this kind of linguistic behaviour is surely a good one, at least in intention, that groups of people should be made to feel socially included rather than excluded and valued rather than disparaged. Politically correct language revolves around issues of race, of sexual orientation, and of disability particularly. Let me take one particular example to do with children. Children with physical or mental problems may be called exceptional children. Children with mental impairments are described as having learning difficulties. Children in general are often these days not called children, which may seem to imply exclusion from the adult world of rights and independence, but they're called young people, or youngsters, or informally, kids. Does all this matter? Yes, we need euphemisms. The lexicographer Robert Birchfield says a language without euphemisms would be a defective instrument of communication. We need them, but we also need to understand them and watch them carefully. We need to make sure, especially in the political domain, that we are the masters of them, not them of us.
All right. You may have noticed that the purpose of a lecture, the main purpose of a lecture, the main message, is not only given at the beginning but also at the end, as a summary. But when we're summarising it, even if it's not very clear at the beginning, does not mean that your summary has to follow exactly what the person says in the sequence, but that you arrange the information clearly so the purpose is given at the outset. Okay. I think it says in your handbook you're allowed 3 questions. I don't think that's 3 questions each, or we'll be here until forever.
In the last sentence, I have the instrument.